Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the Team Nutrition Training Grant for School Meal Recipe Development. We have a few reminders for you before we get started. Today's webinar is beginning at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time. You are currently in listen-only mode and questions will be answered during the last 10 minutes of the webinar. It would be helpful to have a copy of the RFA in front of you as we will be referencing it throughout this webinar. If you have not already done so, you can pull it up from the link currently posted in the chat box. Please use the question box on the bottom right side of your screen at any time during the webinar to enter your questions. We will not be supporting the chat box for questions and answers. However, we will be using it to post important links for you throughout the presentations that we reference. We will answer as many questions as we can at the end of this webinar, and information on the posting of this webinar recording, as well as all questions and responses, will be found in grants.gov under the Related Documents tab at a later date. On January 12, 2021, Food and Nutritional Services released the Request for Applications, or RFA, for the fiscal year 2021 Team Nutrition Training Grant for School Meal Recipe Development, Cohort B. This grant will help states build capacity and a sustainable infrastructure to develop, standardize, prepare, test, and menu recipes for the school meal programs. In addition, these grants will help build a repository of school meal recipes that reflect local agricultural products across the country. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide an overview of the Team Nutrition Training Grant funding opportunity and to cover eligibility, application requirements, and scoring criteria. Before we go any further, we just want to make sure everyone can hear us. If you do not hear us, please dial 415-527-5035 and use the access code 199-196-1770. The presenters for today's webinar are Alicia White, our branch chief of the Nutrition Education and Promotion branch within Child Nutrition Programs, which is the home of the Team Nutrition Training Grant, and myself, Julie Anderson, program officer on the grants team. And our other team members include Karen Vorostek, who is also a program officer, Anna Aerosmith, who is our grants officer, and Ji-Wong Chang, our team's grant specialist. Please note that after today's call, if you have any questions about the RFA, feel free to email Anna Aerosmith. For the USDA and RFA requirements, all questions pertaining to the RFA must be directed to the grants officer. I'm going to turn things over to Alicia to introduce the key components of the RFA.
Thank you, Julie. It looks like our slides are running just a little bit behind, but I wanted to say hello to everyone and thank you for tuning in today to learn more about this new funding opportunity from USDA's Food and Nutrition Service Team Nutrition Initiative. The Team Nutrition Initiative supports the child nutrition programs by providing training and technical assistance for school nutrition professionals, nutrition education for children and their caregivers, and by providing resources that assist schools in providing a healthy nutrition environment for kids. The Team Nutrition Training Grants for state agencies have been part of the Team Nutrition Initiative since its start in 1995, and today I am thrilled to share with you information about the fiscal year 2021 grant opportunity. So earlier this fiscal year, on October 16, 2020, USDA awarded over $4.1 million in funding in fiscal year 2021 Team Nutrition Training Grants for school meal recipe development. These grants went to 15 state agencies that administer the National School Lunch Program. We refer to this group of grantees as Cohort A Team Nutrition Training Grantees for fiscal year 2021. Over 170 new school meal recipes will be developed under these Cohort A grants, utilizing foods produced across the 15 states and the territory. Examples of local agricultural products that will be used in these recipes include grapes from California, cherries from Montana, taro root from Guam, salmon from Washington, and squash from the state of Virginia. Hoping our slides catch up here very quickly, but don't worry, they will be posted to grants.gov. Here you can see the map showing all of our grantees from the first grant cohort. So this month, and the reason that you're all joining us today, is that USDA released an RFA for a second cohort of grants for school meal recipe development, known as Cohort B. State agencies that administer the National School Lunch Program or School Breakfast Program that did not receive an October 2020 Teen Nutrition Training Grant are eligible to apply. State agencies that administer the school meals programs are listed at the link shown on the screen, and we're also posting this link for you in the chat. Many state agencies collaborate with other entities on grant activities, but the state agency must be the grantee. We know that we have a lot of you joining us today, so if you are a partner or somebody looking to work with a state agency, we've posted this grant, this link for your reference. We expect to award approximately $4.8 million in total funding to up to 16 state agencies through this competitive grant process. States may apply for up to $300,000 in grant funding. The purpose for the Cohort B grant is the same as for our Cohort A grants awarded back in October of 2020. Using these grant funds, state agencies will develop standardized recipes, which is a process that helps ensure that recipes produce consistent results in quality, quantity, and nutrition while minimizing food waste and costs. With the Teen Nutrition Training Grant for school meal recipe development, your state will be able to develop recipes for school lunch and school breakfast that reflect foods produced in your state and that are prepared in ways students in your schools will enjoy. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. As a result of these grants, USDA will be able to expand the diversity and variety of USDA standardized recipes that are available to schools and share them through the Institute of Child Nutrition's Recipe Box. This grant will enable states to build their expertise with the recipe standardization process and to provide training to school food authorities. States will also be able to use these grant funds to assist school food authorities in engaging students in school meal recipe development and to help students learn about local agricultural products that are used in the recipes. And finally, states will have the option to award sub-grants to school food authorities to support the implementation of grant activities. The recipes developed under these grants will feature local agricultural products, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how USDA is defining this term for the purposes of the grant. USDA recognizes that the definition of local agricultural products can depend on geographic, social, governmental, physical, or economic parameters, seasonality, and or other factors. Local procurement options differ greatly across communities depending on district and school size, proximity to agricultural areas, growing season, and demographics. So USDA expects that state agencies will have varying definitions of local agricultural products that align with their particular needs and goals. The intent of schools utilizing local agricultural products in their standardized recipes developed under these grants is to serve more locally produced foods in school cafeterias, to improve student nutrition, to provide nutrition education opportunities, and to support local and regional farmers, ranchers, and fishers. Local agricultural products can be meats, seafood, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, dairy foods, or beans, peas, and lentils. FNS intends to share the recipes states developed under these grants on the FNS Teen Nutrition website and, as mentioned before, the Institute of Child Nutrition's publicly available resource center known as the Child Nutrition Recipe Box. These recipes will be available to all states. We are looking to states to help us increase the variety of standardized recipes available for schools. And we know that you, your schools, and the kids eating the meals all have lots of ideas on what types of recipes are needed. But if you're looking for a little inspiration, this slide shares some of the areas where recipes are currently underrepresented in our child nutrition recipe box. So now let's talk about some important dates and information regarding this grant opportunity. As mentioned, the request for applications was posted to grants.gov on January the 12th. If you have not already done so, please be sure to download it and review it carefully for application instructions. We are asking that states submit a letter of intent to apply by February 8th. This helps us plan for your grant application. You will also have the opportunity to review this recorded webinar as well as questions and answers once they are posted on grants.gov. Full grant applications must be submitted through grants.gov by 11:59 p.m. on Monday, April 19th, 2021. Again, thank you all for joining us. I'm now going to turn things back over to Julie, who's going to go over some of the application requirements in more depth. Julie?
Thank you, Alicia, for that wonderful introduction. Let's go ahead and move on to some of the grant specifics. Activities under this grant must be clearly aligned to 4 key objectives. And the first objective is to build state agency capacity and sustainable infrastructure to develop and evaluate standardized recipes in accordance with the USDA guidance. The second key objective is to develop appealing standardized recipes that utilize local agricultural products and meet USDA requirements. The third objective is to engage students and the school community in the process of developing standardized recipes. And the fourth and final key objective is to provide nutrition education to students on local agricultural products featured in the new school meal recipes. Within their proposals, applicants should demonstrate how the state agency will increase their capacity and sustainable infrastructure to develop and evaluate standardized recipes in accordance with the USDA recipe standardization process. Within their proposal, applicants should identify key personnel who will be involved in developing and evaluating standardized recipes and describe their knowledge and experience with recipe development, school meal pattern requirements, and school food service. They should describe the number of standardized recipes to be developed and the process. A minimum of 3 recipes shall be developed and standardized under this grant. Applicants should clearly describe how they will meet all recipe development and standardization requirements conveyed under this grant and document their standardization process. Some methods applicants may use to develop recipes include, but are not limited to, hiring a chef, contracting with a culinary program, or holding a recipe competition. State agencies should demonstrate that a need for a new recipe is well supported by formative research, for example, student surveys or previous evaluation activities. The application should also describe the proposed targeted grade groups for each recipe. Applicants must propose the number of recipes and the types, whether it be entree or side dishes, that they will be developing, testing, and finalizing under this grant. Again, a minimum of 3 recipes that have a local agricultural product as a main ingredient shall be developed and standardized. For more information, you can see the definitions in Appendix A on page 34, and there's a thorough definition of local agricultural products in that appendix. Only domestically produced fruits and vegetables may be included in the recipes, and no grain-based desserts may be developed under this grant. Also, alcohol and non-nutritive sweeteners may not be included in recipes developed under this grant. I'd like to take a minute to talk a little more about the recipes to be proposed under the grant. Each recipe needs to have a local agricultural product as a main ingredient, as we've mentioned. For this RFA, a main ingredient is defined as one of the top 4 ingredients in a recipe and that is by weight or volume. Please note that spices and seasonings are not considered a main ingredient. In addition, applicants must include how the proposed recipe meets an identified need. So before moving forward, the applicant should go to the USDA standardized recipe site and ensure that the proposed or similar recipe is not posted on the website already. The link for the USDA standardized recipes for schools is available on page 12 of the RFA. It's also listed here on this slide and will be posted in the chat box for your convenience. Applicants should also describe how these grant activities will be collaborated with any farm-to-school efforts which are already in place if applicable. For each proposed recipe, the applicant shall describe how the recipe includes a local agricultural product as a main ingredient, including information on the importance of the agricultural product to their state, and how the proposed recipe reflects cultural or regional preferences or preparation methods. SNS is particularly interested in the development of recipes that utilize local agricultural products not currently featured in USDA standardized recipes for schools, and recipes that represent cultural or regional food preparation practices and customs. Applicants must identify key personnel and methods for engaging students in the development of the standardized recipes and the implementation of the recipes as part of meal service under the NSLP, SCP, or seamless summer option of the NSLP. Describe the methods and key personnel for student taste testing of the recipes and describe how this feedback will be used to revise and finalize standardized recipes. Applicants should also submit a copy of proposed taste testing assessment tools and instructions for the taste testing, and also justify their use for the target audience or grade group. Applicants must also identify key personnel and methods for providing nutrition education to students on the local agricultural products being used in the recipes developed, as well as how this nutrition education will be coordinated with the school cafeteria. Applicants should also explain how recipes will be revised based upon feedback from the school nutrition professionals. The state agency must ensure that recipes are practical, feasible, appealing, and sustainable as part of an ongoing school meal service. As part of this grant, grantees will solicit recipes from the school community, which includes a local agricultural product as a main ingredient. Once the recipe is identified, school nutrition staff will prepare and refine the recipe prior to the taste testing and evaluation phase. Grant applicants must then describe how the recipes will be identified, prepared, tested, verified, and adjusted in accordance with the USDA three-phase recipe standardization process, which is shown here. This is described in further detail on pages 14 through 15 of the RFA. As an outcome, these grants will help build a repository of school meal recipes that reflect local agricultural products across the country. Applicants must commit to providing finalized standardized recipes to SNS using the USDA standardized recipe template. The final recipes must also include all components identified on page 15 of the RFA under the recipe finalization heading. Applicants must also include a plan to obtain, gather, and provide to SNS grant success stories and photos on at least a quarterly basis. Applicants must submit a staffing plan that identifies individuals with school meal experience who are a part of the USDA recipe standardization process. Details for each key personnel other than the project director that must be filled during the course of the grant should include the position title, a detailed position description with required qualifications, skills, and knowledge, and a description of specific roles and duties on the project, referencing the project or evaluation narrative, the anticipated date of hire, the contingency plan if the position or positions are not filled in a timely manner. The applicant should include an organizational chart that indicates chain of command of all key project entities and identify any noted conflicts of interest. Key personnel are involved in developing the recipes and ensuring the recipes are appropriate, appealing, and practical for use in school meal settings. They ensure recipes meet food safety requirements. They evaluate recipes to ensure they meet USDA meal pattern requirements and follow USDA's recipe standardization process. And they are required to attend a recipe standardization training at the Institute of Child Nutrition. Also, they ensure that recipe ingredients, equipment, and instructions are applicable to the school meal setting and that all are in accordance with school meal and food safety requirements. Applicants are required to have a project director at a minimum of 0.25 full-time equivalent, or FTE, for this grant that commensurates with the scope of the proposed standardized recipe development and training activities. The project director is responsible for overseeing and coordinating all grant activities, providing fiscal oversight, and exercising effective internal control of funds that are provided to a subcontractor or subgrantee. The application should describe the qualifications of the project director. The project director's resume must demonstrate the appropriate educational, technical, and experiential background for the proposed role. A letter of commitment from the project director and the project director's supervisor is also required. Now I'd like to talk a bit more about the mechanics of putting your application together. The timeline should be an at-a-glance snapshot of when you plan to conduct major activities in your proposal. Ideally, the timeline will be limited to 1 to 2 pages. It should be chronological and list the major activities which will take place each month, the objective or objectives it is tied to, and who is responsible for it. This will help you, as well as reviewers, determine whether or not your timeline is reasonable. When doing the timeline, ask yourself these 3 questions. Did you give enough time to hire open staff positions? Did you allow enough time to complete all of your activities? And third, did you allow time for contingencies? Unexpected developments, such as delays in staffing or purchasing through your state's procurement office, can often delay things considerably. So it's best to give yourself a buffer in timing and create a contingency plan. We know things happen that can't be helped, and we do what we can to be flexible, but all activities should be completed and all funds should be allocated and spent in the 25-month grant period. The timeline should stand alone, should list the actual activities. We want to know what you're doing in your first month, in your second month, and et cetera. And the easiest way for reviewers to do that is with a monthly timeline. If you do a good job of describing your activities in the narrative portion of your proposal, then your timeline only needs bulleted points. This slide is a good illustration or example of the minimum information that we would like to see on a timeline. Grantee reporting and dissemination will be done through project directors participating in a grantee quarterly collaboration call, which is always scheduled, quarterly reports submitted to FNS using the Performance Progress Report, or PPR, the reporting template which is found in Appendix E, a final report which is submitted to FNS 90 days after the completion of the grant, and full details for the final report requirements can also be found on page 18 of the RFA. But in general, grantees will submit a final set of electronic grant materials that are 508 compliant. In addition to the SF 424 family of forms required through grants.gov, you need to include an itemized budget narrative in your application. We want to see a line item budget in table format, followed by a brief paragraph for context and clarity. You should use the same object class categories from the SF 424A and itemize your expenditures. You should research costs thoroughly before creating proposed budget requests. The more detail you provide on the cost for specific items, the fewer questions we will have later in the review process. For example, let's say you've included a regional recipe standardization training as one of your major activities. In your budget, you set that line item at $15,000 and you do not provide any additional details. So there's no indication as to what is covered with that $15,000. So we will ask, does it include room rental, Food for recipe development. Does it include cost of the chef or trainer, or for printing of training materials for the anticipated number of participants, or funding for staff time for additional help needed to implement the training? These are all things you want to consider, or details you want to consider when putting the timeline together in the line item budget. It is great to help reviewers if you link budget items to specific activities, and it's a great check for you to ensure that each cost is allocated to support the grant's objectives. And also, please be sure to check your math, even if you're creating your budget in a spreadsheet like Excel. This slide has an example of a line item within a budget, and the costs are broken down and linked to two of the grant objectives. For this example, we are going to assume that the narrative portion of the technical proposal did a thorough job of describing what Chef Nutrition was going to do. If the reviewers can't remember, they can see right there that the activities are described in objectives 1.3 and 2.2 of the proposal, so they can flip back quickly and review it. In addition to linking this line item to the objectives, the grant writer here did not just ask for $3,600 for a consultant. Instead, they broke it down to the hourly rate and multiplied that by the number of hours to work to be done for this grant. This allows reviewers to look at both the hourly rates and the number of hours projected for your project. Numbers in your budget should always be as specific as possible. Personnel costs are another item that is often over budgeted. Are you planning to hire someone and fund their position with Team Nutrition grant funds? If so, you should always factor in a realistic turnaround time for you to post a job announcement, to interview them, and go through your state's human resources process to officially hire that individual. If the process will take 3 to 6 months, don't budget for the full 36 months of that person's salary and benefits. FTE estimates should account for the time to complete the hiring process. All requested costs must be allowable, allocable, necessary, and reasonable in accordance with new OMB Code of Federal Regulations cost principles as follows. 2 CFR Part 200, which is Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards, and 2 CFR Part 400, Uniform Administration Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for Federal Awards. Allowable use of funds includes, but is not limited to, what's listed on the slide. Food and nutrition equipment, sub-grants to local SFAs, personnel, training and staff development, technology necessary to meet key objectives, nutrition education, and travel. Pages 9 through 12 in the RFA has a full list. Allowable costs in the grant include food purchases to develop and test standardized recipes developed. Local agricultural products featured in these recipes must be procured from a local producer if available. Food purchases for taste testing events conducted with students who attend an MSLP participating school to evaluate or promote the standardized recipes being developed under the grant. Food purchase to demonstrate or provide instruction to school nutrition professionals on the preparation of a standardized recipe developed under this grant, and food used as a part of nutrition education activities with students in accordance with the objectives of this grant. The total expenditure of food purchases may not exceed 10% of the total state grant award. For each sub-grant, the food expenditures may not exceed 20% of the funds awarded. Please see pages 9 through 10 in the RFA for a full list. Team Nutrition Training Grant Funds may be used for travel costs necessary for conducting grant activities, and these may also include all associated costs for the project director and or key personnel to attend a one-day recipe standardization training at the Institute of Child Nutrition in Oxford, Mississippi, and the anticipated time frame for this will be in February 2022. And a second option is for the project director to attend a 2-day in-person grantee meeting in Washington, D.C. Team nutrition training grant funds may be used for travel costs necessary for travel listed here as well. Local and out-of-state trainings, taste test events and grant activities, stipends to reimburse local travel and hotel costs, school-sanctioned field trips to farms or production facilities of local agricultural products. Please thoroughly review the allowable cost section in the RFA on pages 9 through 12. Again, all requested costs must be allowable, allocable, necessary, and reasonable in accordance with the OMB Code of Federal Regulations, cost principles in 2 CFR Part 200 and 400. There are specific examples provided under each category of the allowable cost section. Of note, the following are unallowable costs: purchasing meals and snacks for training participants, foods used to prepare a meal for which reimbursement will be provided under any of the FNS Nutrition Assistance Programs, any cost associated with incentives or prizes, foods provided directly to students and families to eat at home, foods unrelated to the standardized recipes developed with the grant, and lastly, gardening equipment or tools, including seeds, soil, planters, and plants. Some states opt to provide subgrants to SFAs participating in their grant, while others do not. Either way is fine, but for those of you who do offer subgrants, the following components should be outlined in your proposal. First, what will your subgrantee award process be? Some questions that you should ask yourself and answer while you're writing this section of your proposal are: will you award subgrants competitively, or will you handpick your subgrantees? What criteria will you use to determine who is awarded a subgrant? How much money do you plan to award? What are allowable costs? And again, you can refer to the RFA in pages 9 through 12 for a list of the allowable costs. Next, an application form should be developed so that all potential subgrantees are providing the same information for you to evaluate the proposal. This application can be included as part of your proposal appendices. Outline what support and technical assistance you will provide to the subgrantee. Discuss your plan to monitor your subgrantee's progress and effectiveness. Discuss how you plan to promote the availability of your subgrants. And lastly, discuss in your application a contingency plan in case you do not have enough applicants apply for the subgrant, and your plans if you lose a subgrantee during the grant period. Subgrantees should be asked to clearly outline their goals and objectives of their project and include a detailed timeline and budget with their application and proposal. If a state opts to provide subgrants, they should ensure that the school food authorities that receive subgrants have schools that are enrolled as team nutrition schools. Please visit the Team Nutrition website, the link located here, and this should also be located in the chat box for you. Please keep in mind that there should be no commingling of funds from other grants. For example, if you have another active Team Nutrition Training Grant or USDA Farm to School grant, all funds must be kept and be accounted for separately. If you do have a Farm to School grant, the application should describe how activities under this Team Nutrition Training Grant would complement but not duplicate any existing Farm to School activities if applicable. Application scoring criteria. So there are 5 major categories in which your application will be scored. The first category is the recipe standardization approach, which will be worth 25 points. 20 points will be valued towards the value of recipe standardization. Student engagement and education will be worth 25 points. Project management and quality assurance, 15 points. And the budget plan, another 15 points. The details of these categories are also listed on pages 27 through 30 of the RFA. Please make sure that each element listed under each major category is included in your application. It's suggested to have somebody read through your application and then compare it to the list of required elements discussed in the RFA scoring criteria, just for a backup check. Also have someone who is not immersed in your program read through your application to ensure that it makes sense to an outsider. Keep in mind that the grant reviewers, while knowledgeable about child nutrition programs, will not be well-versed in your state's programs and operations. Here are some important dates to remember. All letters of intent are due to Anna Aerosmith by February 8th, 2021. Grant applications and all of the accompanying materials must be submitted to grants.gov by April 19th, and the anticipated award announcement date will be in August. All right, thank you for joining us. This is the end of our informational portion of the webinar, but at this time we'd like to begin to take some questions and answers from the Q&A box. Please remember that we will also be posting these questions on government.web.gov. However, Karen is going to take over here and start reading some questions for us so that we can get rolling on getting these answered, or as many as we can.
Okay.
Karen?
Okay, great job, Julie. Thank you. I'm sure you need to get a drink of water there after providing all that great information. As Julie mentioned, we are going to cover the many questions, and some we have previously received via email, and some others were in the Q&A box on this webinar. I've noticed that we got a lot of questions on who is eligible, and I want to really go over that before we go into the specific questions. To be eligible to apply for a teen nutrition training grant, you must be a state agency that administers the USDA's school breakfast program or national school lunch program. Each state may only submit one application. So, that is the overall general response. You have to be a state agency. However, I am going to go through some of the questions that people specifically put in, and Julie, if you wouldn't mind responding to them, that would be great.
Sure.
First question is, can a nonprofit child care agency apply for this grant?
Only state agencies that administer the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program are eligible to apply.
Okay. And this is going to sound a bit redundant in your answer, but can an individual school district apply, or is it just the state that can apply?
Just state agencies that administer the NSLP or the SBP are eligible. So individual school districts are not eligible to apply. However, we do encourage interested school districts to contact their state agency. As part of their grant application, states may propose subgrants for school food authorities as part of their grant activities. So that could be an option.
Okay. Another question, how many state agencies will be awarded this grant?
We anticipate awarding up to 16 teen nutrition training grants.
Okay. And let's see here. How can we find out if our state will be applying so that we have an opportunity to apply for a subaward if they choose to do so?
So we encourage interested school food authorities to contact their state agency that administers the National School Lunch Program or School Breakfast Program. In one of the beginning, I think it was one of the first 5 slides, the state agency contact information link was listed on one of the slides and also put in the chat box. But that would be a good place to look.
Okay, great. Okay, going in a little bit of a different direction, does the project director have to be a state agency employee?
Yes, applicants are required to have a project director of the state agency at a minimum of 0.25 full-time equivalent for this grant. They would also be responsible for overseeing and coordinating all the grant activities, providing the fiscal oversight, and exercising all the effective internal control of the funds that are provided to a sub-grant contractor or a sub-grantee.
Okay. Can the project director role be split between two individuals?
Yes, it can, but if an applicant chooses to have two project directors, one of the positions must still be at least 0.25 FTE within the applicant state agency. And if you do have two project directors, please just make sure to clearly identify that in your application and list them both by name as well as by their associated FTE that are planned to work on the grant.
Okay. And can a state with an active fiscal year 2017 or 2019 Team Nutrition Training Grant apply for this grant?
Yes, as long as they administer the National School Lunch Program or the School Breakfast Program, and as long as they were not awarded a Cohort A fiscal year 2021 grant, Team Nutrition Training Grant.
Okay. Okay, if school nutrition staff need to attend a training, can we include substitute pay within the budget for them to attend a required training as part of this grant?
Yes, so Team Nutrition Training Grant funds can be used to hire substitute school nutrition staff in order for school staff to attend training sessions or workshops. They just have to ensure that any of those substitute costs are included in the proposed grant budget.
Okay, let's see here. Applicants must demonstrate how local agricultural products shall be used as a main ingredient in the standardized recipes. How is main ingredient defined?
So if measured by weight or volume, a main ingredient is defined as one of the top 4 ingredients in the recipe. So that local agricultural product must provide a credible amount of food component in the school meal program, and it must be one of the top 4 ingredients in the recipe. And just as a side note, spices and seasonings are not considered a main ingredient.
Okay, let's see here. I understand that a minimum of 3 standardized recipes shall be developed for this grant. Is it allowable for the recipes to feature the same local agricultural product with different preparations and different flavor profiles? For example, honey carrot coins, curried roasted carrots, and carrot salad.
Yes, you may use the same local agricultural product for more than 1 recipe or for 3 recipes. However, you just have to make sure you can demonstrate that there is a need for that recipe, and that needs to be supported by some research like the student surveys or some prior evaluation activities.
Okay. Can you clarify the definition of local agricultural products in terms of proximity to the school?
So a state can determine a specific mileage proximity for their local agricultural products. However, USDA will leave that to state's discretion. We expect that state agencies will have varying definitions of local agricultural products that they align with their particular needs and goals. So the intent of schools utilizing local agricultural products in their recipes is to serve more locally produced foods in school cafeterias. We're trying to improve the student nutrition, provide nutrition education opportunities, and really support the local and regional farmers, ranchers, and fishers. So local agricultural products can come from local meats, seafood, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, dairy foods, or legumes.
Okay. Is it required for the project director to attend the 1-day recipe standardization training?
Yes, the project director should be among the key personnel attending the training, and each state will be allowed to send 4 key personnel totals. So that number 4 is including one of those being the project director.
Okay. Our state produces a very large variety of crops. Are we able to select any of these crops, or must we focus on the crops most commonly associated with our state?
You can select from the variety of local products in your state. You can also reference the value of recipe standardization scoring criteria that's in the RFA. But FNS is primarily interested in just increasing the variety of standardized recipes reflected in the Institute of Child Nutrition's recipe box, which the link was also posted in the chat box and on several of the slides. So it would be great to scroll through that site and see if some of the agricultural products you're interested in using are underutilized or utilized a lot on the site, and maybe base some of your decisions on that as well.
Okay. Can the standardized recipes be developed for a specific grade grouping, or should we have recipes that pertain to the taste of all grade groupings?
You do need to indicate which grade group the recipes will be developed for.
Okay. Please explain USDA's intention regarding roles of the state agency, SFAs, contracted chefs, and students. It sounds like the recipe development process would be well suited to be owned by SFAs, but the RFA stresses state agency staff training regarding recipe standardization.
So we talked a lot about this. One of the key objectives of this grant is to build state agency capacity and a sustainable infrastructure to develop and evaluate standardized recipes, and that they are in accordance with the USDA guidance. So we want these recipes to all match the same criteria. And the approach for developing recipes outlined in the RFA allows the state agencies to propose staffing and roles and responsibilities to meet the key grant objectives.
Okay. If a recipe is prepared for purposes of recipe development, standardization, or training, can the recipe then be consumed by training participants or recipe development staff?
Yes, absolutely. This food can be consumed as part of training activities or donated. USDA encourages grantees to donate uneaten, wholesome food to appropriate nonprofit institutions, providing this practice is not prohibited by their state or local laws or regulations.
Okay. For what positions should letters of commitment be provided in the application?
We ask that a letter of commitment should be included for the project director or project directors if there are going to be 2, and the project director supervisor and any other identified key personnel.
Okay. And there is one question that I'm just going to address, and there's a couple questions that go around this, and it's about individuals wanting to know who they can contact in their state to network and possibly work with to apply. And again, if you go to look at, go to your state, and I believe we sent the link out in the chat, you can see who is the contact for your state, and then contact them and talk to them about, you wanting to participate, maybe, be a partner. If you are from an, school food authority, maybe, you know, they would want to work on a grant that would have a sub-grant, but that's the best place to go. And I think we just posted the state contact list. It's right there at the end of the chat, and I think that that would be probably the best route to go. I know somebody mentioned that they would like to have some time to, you know, actually connect and network during this particular webinar, and it is just an informational webinar, and the way it's set up, it really would not be feasible to allow people to network, but we really encourage you to go to the state contacts list and, you know, connect within your state to see how you can participate in one of the team nutrition, you know, training grant applications. And, you know, again, if you have any questions that you want to send forward or you want to talk to someone, maybe we can put the slide back up or put it in the chat box, but Anna Arrowsmith's email address, she is the only one that you can contact as the grants officer, so that, and she will provide you with the information that you need and help answer any questions that you have. And if she is not totally sure of the answers, then she reaches out to the Team Nutrition grant staff, and then we work together. But all communication has to go through her. So I'll leave it up there a minute, and I don't know if somebody could put Anna's address in the chat box. That might be helpful. Anna, I just want to make sure you get a lot of emails. So let's see here. And there's one other question that it seemed like it came back in. And when you say 0.25 FTE must be required, does that mean that the employee will need to designate that much time per week, or just that they are at least 0.25 FTE employee? They need to be a 0.25 full-time equivalent on this grant. They could actually, you know, be a full-time equivalent for the state agency, but they need to be working and coordinating this grant at a 0.25 FTE. And I'm just scrolling through here to see, I'm not sure if we covered this one or not. Is it required for the project director to attend the one-day recipe standardization training? I can't remember if we did or not, but yes, the project director should be among the key personnel attending the training. Each state is allowed to send up to 4 key personnel to the training, and that would include the project director. And I believe that should about cover it, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Karen.
Here, I don't see the SFA enrollment link. So I'm not sure, school. I'm not sure what actually we're asking or what is being asked there, but we will, if you want to type in what you actually need there, Angel, we will try to get that for you. All right, I'll turn it back over to you, Julie. Sorry.
No. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate your help, and we sure appreciate everybody attending today and taking time out of your day. We hope that you found this webinar helpful, and we really look forward to receiving your applications for the Team Nutrition Training Grant for School Meal Recipe Development. Once again, a recording of this webinar and any questions that were posted in the question and answer box and any questions that were sent to Anna Arrowsmith prior to this webinar, we will prepare a question and answer document and post all of that in grants.gov shortly, and you'll be able to view it all there. So have a wonderful day and take care, everyone.